Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We now have the closest evidence yet that the president was possibly just 1 degree of separation from the violent armed insurrection. And it comes to us from a federal filing from the Department of Justice. But before we get to that, to understand what this new development means, it's important to keep in mind just how many people had access, of course, to the inner workings of the Trump White House, particularly in the last 2 months. We know from Mark Meadows' text messages that fringe conspiracy theorists had a direct line of communication in the Oval Office. The wife of sitting Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Ginny, was texting Meadows about overturning the 2020 election, as well as all sorts of crazy QAnon conspiracy theories about Trump's enemies being rounded up and held prisoner at Guantanamo Bay. Mike Lindell, the pillow man, of course, was also texting Meadows about the election, including a rambling screed about God and rigged voting machines. You got Fox News hosts Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and Brian Kilmeade all texting Meadows either before or during the insurrection. And then there's the head of the far-right gang, the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio. Now, he was indicted by the Department of Justice back in March for his role in inciting the insurrection. In the days before January 6th, Tarrio says he was invited to the White House, although the Trump administration claimed he was just there for a public tour. We also know the Proud Boys, including Tarrio, appeared at a Stop the Steal event with the longtime advisor to Donald Trump, Roger Stone, in the days leading up to the insurrection. So we know lots of fringe figures had access to Donald Trump's inner circle, and now we may be learning about one more. And his name, we've said before on the show, his name is Elmer Stewart Rhodes III. Interesting guy. He's the head of another far-right gang known as the Oath Keepers. They mostly like to role play as militiamen, and they are vociferous supporters of Donald Trump. Rhodes is currently facing federal charges of seditious conspiracy, a rarely prosecuted crime, for his role in attempting to violently overturn the results of the election. According to his indictment, quote, Rhodes and certain co-conspirators planned to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power, which included multiple ways to deploy force. They coordinated travel across the country to enter Washington, D.C., equipped themselves with a variety of weapons, donned combat and tactical gear, and were prepared to answer Rhodes' call to take up arms at Rhodes' direction. Some co-conspirators also amassed firearms on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., distributed them among a quick reaction force teams, and planned to use the firearms in support of their plot to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. Rhodes also told another Oath Keeper he could store those weapons in his hotel room on January 6, quote, if you want to steal weapons with the operation leader, you can. He'll have a secure car trunk or his hotel room or mine. That's from government filings. Now, the government alleges Rhodes himself spent more than $10,000 on weapons, accessories, and tactical gear in the days before the insurrection. And the Quick Reaction Force ended up storing most of its weapons in nearby Virginia, with Rhodes and his allies allegedly plotting a way to bring them to the Capitol quickly once they took control of the building. Quote, the Quick Reaction Force teams were prepared to rapidly transport firearms and other weapons into Washington, D.C., in support of operations using force to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. I mean, take a step back just for a second before I continue. Like, this is what a coup plot is, right? As the government alleges. I mean, one Trump supporter even posted this picture of what appears to be guns and tactical gear stored in Virginia to a pro-Trump website on the night of January 5th. We also have pretty clear-cut evidence that that same Stewart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers, met with the head of the Proud Boys for 30 minutes in an underground parking garage. That's thanks to another DOJ filing. Quote, a documentary film crew was present in the garage and at one point picked up audio of a person referencing the Capitol. In the days after the insurrection, the government says, Rhodes spent thousands more on gear and ammunition. On Inauguration Day, he went on Alex Jones' show to complain about Trump not doing more to support the violent insurrection and to call on his fellow Trump supporters to resist the illegitimate Biden regime.
It's just amazing that Trump will let the election be stolen out from under him and then let our country be stolen like this, our government. So we have to now prepare to walk the path of the founding fathers. You declare your independence from that illegitimate regime. We still defend the Constitution, but they're the ones that are the usurpers and the violators, and declare that. And then get strong in your communities. You need to be raising local militias in your towns and counties. And like the founders did, you need to then nullify, refuse to comply. And when they come for you, you defend yourselves.
Okay. These people were serious, I guess, is what I want to say here. I mean, they talked about a plan to use violence to overturn the results of the election. And according to the federal evidence compiled, and again, it's just alleged by the government, they did a lot of planning. Now, we now know from a new federal filing that Rhodes at least claims he was coordinating with someone close to Donald Trump. On January 6th, Rhodes reportedly took a call with a source apparently close to Trump on speakerphone. And another Oath Keeper, quote, heard Rhodes repeatedly implore the individual to tell President Trump to call upon groups like the Oath Keepers to forcibly oppose the transfer of power. This individual denied Rhodes' request to speak directly with President Trump. After the call ended, Rhodes stated to the group, "I just want to fight." So there's a lot we don't know here. This could have just been bluster from Rhodes. It's not implausible, though, that he had connections to the White House. I mean, the morning of the insurrection, for example, the Oath Keepers were providing security to none other than Roger Stone, Trump's longtime advisor. That's established. So if Rhodes truly was on the phone with someone close to Trump, imploring the president to tell armed far-right extremist groups to oppose the transfer of power by force, well, that's a pretty big deal. Among other things to consider, just imagine, for example, what would have happened if Rhodes had gotten through to the president. The man who had already incited the insurrection was reportedly watching the violence unfold on TV with glee and was desperate to stop the certification of Biden's elections by any means. Ryan Riley is a justice reporter for NBC News. He's been covering the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and he joins me now. Ryan, give us the context for this filing. Where did this allegation from the government surface?
Yeah, so this is the third guilty plea we've seen in a seditious conspiracy case from a member of the Oath Keepers. And frankly, when this rolled out yesterday, it was sort of like, oh, there's another one, okay, in the afternoon, sort of almost a ho-hum thing, which you've got to step back for a moment and remember this is a seditious conspiracy case. But, you know, you stroll into the courtroom, there's a few reporters around, interest has sort of gone down a little bit since the first trial and the first pleadings that we've seen. And then all of a sudden they start rolling this out. We're going through the seditious conspiracy charges. And when they got to this one paragraph, the judge actually just paused for a moment and I believe said something along the lines of, just want to make sure we have this one right or get this one clear, and went through this allegation that is agreed to by both the prosecution and the defendant in this case, who is now an admitted seditious conspirator, that he was in the Phoenix Park Hotel right off the grounds of the Capitol and was overheard this conversation between some sort of Trump intermediary and Stewart Rhodes. And this is, remind you, this is like as the Capitol grounds are still occupied. Like they had just come from the Capitol. Police were still clearing things out. This was right in between the time, like after Trump sent a message about, about the initially saying sort of go away, but then it was before he said, remember this day forever. So it was still like an active scene at that point.
Yeah, and the judge actually being brought up short by this. I mean, the testimony, I mean, this is coming, right, via this plea deal, right? It's the third Oath Keeper to plea, which means the government's gotten a lot of cooperation in building the seditious conspiracy case against Rhodes and maybe others.
Correct. And, he's been cooperating for a while. It's very clear because, frankly, they walked up to him in the hallway right before the hearing, and he was very familiar with the prosecutors, and just the way this case was brought about. He's testifying before the grand jury today. They were talking about the logistics behind that. So, I mean, this is a significant development, and it really is, it could go in a couple different ways here. They're both preparing for this forthcoming trial with a number of Oath Keeper defendants. So he'll obviously be a key defendant there. But also, frankly, whoever this mysterious person was, this apparent Trump connect, that's also something that's going to be explored. Of course, it says there that he was not actually connected with Trump. We don't know, as you said, who exactly that is, but it's a big mystery right now. Who was this person? Who was this link allegedly between Stewart Rhodes and Donald Trump?